Imagine Donald Trump running a huge bluff against Elon Musk, or even vice versa. Maybe some of this is already happening. Or imagine Kanye West check raising the river all in versus Mike Tyson. Let's find out who's got what it takes to be a poker legend and who would cave under the pressure. Poker's more than just chips and cards. It's also about reading people, knowing when to strike, keeping cool under pressure, and knowing what the right play is and doing it anyway. Let's look at 15 celebrities now and see who would come out on top between them, and if it actually plays out in the real world where it's no longer just chips and cards. Donald Trump, first player. Okay, I think I've got a good read on him. I think he would actually be great at bluffing in a sense, but not really. He would be great in the sense that he'd be very confident. He'd be able to do things without really fidgeting or staying cool under pressure. He'd have all that. But if you looked under the hood and looked at the interior of his play, well, there's lots of holes in what he's doing. And so if you figured out how he works and the interior parts of his game, which would be kind of all over the place, then you could see that he's actually very exploitable. So I think he'd be the kind of guy who would have succeeded in the earlier era of poker and had quite a bit of talent, matter of fact, but would have stood no chance against the better players later on once people had very, very sound game structures with limited holes and once people really applied themselves. And speaking of which, this actually applies to a lot of his political strategy and a lot of the things he says. In my honest opinion, I don't usually get kind of a cringe feeling when I listen to people and just think to myself, oh my God, like there's so much inconsistency here. I can't listen to this. But I got this very, very strongly with Trump because very clearly he was trying to manipulate a certain audience into behaving a certain way that did not really listen to logic at all or reason. And this just really irritated me and actually was what got me to think to myself, you know what, I should get into politics at some point, work towards this angle. I can't listen to this. I want to make a difference. I think really a lot of his strategy, even though it's like hard to balance on the whole, is probably flawed, but still better than what's out there, to be honest. I think he actually does have a lot of, he has some positive characteristics and can be the right exploitative strategy in a lot of spots politically and in poker, really. Even this can be good at poker, what he does, but in the long run, it fails in both, in my opinion. For one thing, it made me much more of a fan of him that, first of all, Elon Musk supports him, and second of all, that how he responded to getting shot was amazing. That was, whatever he did there, that was the move for sure. This whole like thing after getting shot, that's hard to do. That's really takes some balls. Like for sure he could pull off some crazy as fuck doing that. If he can do that, that's really something. Next one is Kanye West, who seems to be in his own world, so that might be where our similarities stop there. There's a massive ego, maybe not where our similarities stop, but he might also have such limited emotional control he might actually respond to this video, which would be amazing. I would definitely get some laughter out of me. But you know, these music types actually seem to have a lot of similarities from what I see. In my opinion, he would be somebody who has some kind of talent at poker but just can't control himself at all, just goes nuts when people do X or Y. And so I think that he would probably be able to beat like players that really have no clue what they're doing. He must have some kind of intelligence to be this successful at business and at music, I would think. It's some kind of innate creativity. I don't really know how music creativity works, but what I can tell you is that these musical types are very, very often very emotional, have very big egos from what I've seen. Not all of them, 100%. Not all of them. Please don't quote me on saying all of them, but their egos and their ways of being seems more rooted in their success and their emotional experience than something that's a bit more tempered. And this is totally 100 million% true about Kanye. And that's not really a good thing in poker. I think that music is very good at have a thing to emote, to be very emotional with things, but it's not really a great humbler of a field to be in, especially because it's almost good to get confirmation bias to be successful at music. So it'd be interesting to see if I'm right or wrong with him. It definitely looks like my suspicions are playing out in reality with him, other than the fact he's apparently incredibly talented. So let's go to the next one. Lady Gaga, she wrote the song Poker Face. Other than that, I don't really know a whole lot about her. She's really good at making music, clearly. I've seen her dance moves, which, by the way, dancing as someone who's tried is super hard. What these people do on the stage and dancing, they've clearly worked their asses off for. I would imagine that, like most musicians, She's not going to be able to control her ego and it's an attractive feminine trait to be very emotional or show your emotions, I should say, wear your heart on your sleeves. But if you're not able to control that at the poker table, I don't know how good she is at controlling it, to be honest. But I would think for music, you want to like express your emotions as much as possible. So I would think that she's probably not going to be that great, but because she wrote the song Poker Face, she's got to have some kind of credibility. And then another thing I want to add is that these celebrity women are a little bit smarter than they appear, as someone who's got a little bit of background information on them. An example being Paris Hilton, who's actually very smart, but she portrays that she's not for the sake of manipulating her audience, is one way of putting it. She at least wants to appeal to a broader audience. And I guess a lot of guys are not really that into a woman who seems really smart and deep thinking, general masses on the whole. But there are some guys, for example, myself, that greatly appreciate that. And there's a really high chance that Lady Gaga has similar characteristics because these celebrities are quite a bit smarter than you might think. They just don't really show that side, at least on the surface, to a huge percent of the demographic. They rather show the sides that appeal to the huge percent of the demographic because guess what? A huge demographic is appealed to them. Think about it like that. Maybe Lady Gaga is playing as a great poker face with her entire audience. I don't know. You need a pretty good poker face to put up with annoying fans, as I'm sure these celebrities do deal with. Mike Tyson. Well, I would think that these like top fighters would do pretty well at poker. So first of all, this guy Lao Tzu, the perfect warrior, is one that never gets angry. And so I would think that this is true with Mike Tyson. I don't know a whole lot about him. Well, I think he's got some anger issues. Vaguely, I've known some stories. And yeah, I know he has immense talent at fighting, undoubtedly. I don't know details on the stories, but they sound very crazy. I would just think that if someone's really good at fighting, they're probably going to be really good at the strategic element of poker. They're absolutely going to be able to run big bluffs. Big bluffing is actually part of fighting. Someone who's done a bit of martial arts myself, strategy is a big part of it. I still think that these guys are going to have quite some big egos. I'm kind of doubtful that he's going to be able to control himself in a lot of spots and maybe get a little too crazy. I would think that he's going to run some super crazy bluffs just because he's used to people kind of being intimidated by him and respecting his physical prowess. He would think that he would be able to use his bravado at the poker table. I would also think that he doesn't like to be messed with, is my personal guess, because I would think that he would be a little bit insulted to think that someone could bully him at the poker table with their money or their aggressive plays and think to himself he's an incredible fighter. That's just my personal guess. I'd never played with him. Don't know a whole lot about him otherwise. Gordon Ramsay. Gordon Ramsay clearly is capable of doing some acting and some poker facing because I had understood that he was a massive asshole because of what was going on TV and how he treats people on TV. And it turns out that apparently in person, he's actually a very nice guy, which is what multiple people I know that know of him have said of him. I still think that these guys are the best in the world at what they do. Apparently he's a really good cook. Some of these celebrities are not the best in the world at anything, but he's legitimately the best in the world at cooking from what I've heard. He legit knows his stuff. Like people who have that have to have something that's going to make them good at other things, certainly strategy related things. And I would think cooking has lots of elements to that. There must be a certain element of logic of knowing what goes with what. I would think that he's able to control his emotions as well, just because cooking is actually quite a high pressure thing. To be a high quality chef is extremely stressful. In fact, I know of a story given in Peter Thiel's book 0 to 1 of a chef that killed himself because the pressure was so high from the competition if he didn't get a certain Michelin star, and he failed to do it, and then he did kill himself, as a matter of fact. So in order to be the best in the world at this, you really have to know your stuff. I joked about taking him down when I was taking cooking lessons in my apartment or my house in London, which I no longer have. Later did I learn that, wow, cooking is actually really, really complicated. And I don't know how I was ever going to take him down. But maybe with the right chef, that teaches me could take him down. How about Homer Simpson? Homer Simpson would probably be terrible for all kinds of reasons. I just don't see what strength this guy possesses. He's not smart. He's not disciplined. You need discipline too. Discipline is actually more useful than intelligence, because if you can't wield your intelligence, then you're going to do all sorts of stupid things. And there's plenty of examples of people that are smart. I mean, I like to think I'm smart, but I definitely don't have discipline sometimes. Totally do things that aren't productive and good. Alex Ramosi said that a disciplined fool can accomplish a lot more than someone who's intelligent and can't. And I totally agree with that. Hopefully so in my actions as well. But I don't really see what advantage this dude has. I guess this guy would just punt off his chips and be like the ultimate whale if he had money. You would kind of hope that he wins the lottery, so he'd come and dump it at poker if he had a gambling problem. At least a lot of poker players would. He also doesn't really seem to care about anything. It doesn't seem to have any regard for money. I just don't understand what advantage this guy would have other than he doesn't give a shit and would play very erratically, so he'd be a little bit difficult to play against for that reason. But other than that, I just don't see where that's going to go. Bill Gates. Well, first of all, Bill Gates looks like a giant nerd, probably is, which isn't always a bad thing. Coming from a fellow nerd myself, I'm allowed to make fun of nerds. I'm pretty sure that's how that works. So that's actually a great skill in poker these days, be a giant fucking nerd. And he's good with money, so he's got a lot of money skills. I don't really know how good he is with risk in sense of risking money in ways that are justified to pay off. Apparently pretty good because he did start his own company, but he didn't have a whole lot to lose when he did it because he started as kind of a no-name, but he succeeded. That's about what I know of him. I know he's got a charity, know that he's into longevity a fair degree, seems to have a lot of good intentions. I don't know a whole lot other than that. I would think that he would have to be pretty good. He must be very smart, seems to care about money. I believe he lives modestly or relatively modestly. A lot of reasons to think this guy would be pretty good. I would just wonder if he's going to be tough to play against. Let's put it that way. I don't really see in what way he would lose. Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan, I would think, would be pretty good. He must have a pretty decent poker face because he has his own podcast, which means that he's constantly under pressure and has to manage his emotions, at least with dealing with guests. I know that he says some controversial things that's hard to get away with and requires some insight, some forethought, some wisdom, some life experience. So I think that Joe would have the capacity at least to learn a lot of the skills of poker. He's into some spicy stuff too, so he's got an element of creativity. I would think that he would actually be at least pretty good. I don't know if he'd be like a top player or anything. I would think that the top players would be something like entrepreneurs. There's a lot of the same skill set of entrepreneurs, the same virtues anyway, in entrepreneurship are champion in poker. You don't see any reason why you wouldn't lack the risk tolerance. Some people lack that. What can I say? Goku. So Goku, I would think, definitely have no problem with risk. Doesn't seem to care about money at all. Definitely has some level of intelligence, even though he doesn't show it. He seems like someone who's not very smart, but then it comes out, at least when there's justice that's challenged, a bit quirky, but doesn't seem to be thinking too deeply about a variety of topics that would help. If he was like really into poker, I'm sure there would be some kind of talent there. You know, these guys that are good at martial arts, I just like wonder how much of that is going to translate over to poker, because on one hand you have to have some version of intelligence or some kind of version of talent in order to be good, but on the other, does that really require deep thinking? One thing you guys don't know about these martial arts guys is they actually become deep thinkers at some point. There's a lot of them like Sun Tzu that wrote a book and about deep insights, and there's multiple guys that are quite philosophical, which is so funny to me. I just don't really see the connection too clearly between martial arts and philosophy. Although ironically, I went the other way. I was more philosophical and I realized the value of martial arts because you can discipline your body and your mind with it. That's valuable, but going from martial arts to philosophy, I don't really get it. Anyway, should be pretty good, I guess. I mean, you must have emotional control to some extent. Macho Man, Randy Savage. I think this guy would not be good at poker, if I'm really honest. Just doesn't seem to be someone who's checked his ego much at all or thinking a whole lot along those rounds. I think he's just one of these guys that is cocky, period, and doesn't, he'd have to get a little older to realize, oh, I can't be this over-the-top cocky person, and find out it bites him in the ass. And I don't really know how women tolerate his shit, to be honest. These types of personalities seem like to be so annoying to deal with. So I've dealt with them a little bit before, and it just drives me totally insane. Yeah, I just think that he's just too stuck in his own ways to change his views. He's got the kind of Donald Trump personality that if it's not going to be immediately good, it's gonna hit some major roadblocks in its development. Elon Musk. I think Elon Musk would be pretty damn good at poker, to be honest. He clearly is capable of shifting his views and just is doing things that need to be done in extreme sorts of ways that are unprecedented. Clearly doesn't care a whole lot about convention, and I personally think that's quite useful for poker. There's a hidden benefit of poker players that they don't care about convention. That's why they're poker pros instead of going to school and getting a normal job, blah, blah, blah. The irony is that actually, as Nassim Taleb says, being a poker player, well, he doesn't say this, but being a taxi driver is a lot safer than having a job at a company, because one day you may lose everything if you have a job at a company, but a taxi driver has a lot of volatility with their payday, but will never ever lose their job as a taxi driver. There will always be people who are in demand for driving taxis. And a bit of a similar thing is going on with poker, where the volatility of poker is actually pretty predictable in a way. And if you're pretty good at poker, you're going to have opportunity to earn. It's never going to change too drastically, as a matter of fact. No one really talks about this. That's an important side note, is that being a poker player is not as risky as it appears. Elon Musk clearly has some high risk tolerance, even to the point of insanity, where he's taking these risks that don't necessarily care about money. And I mean, finally, someone else sees that money is not the only thing worth fighting for. It's even kind of arbitrary to focus on money. He's maybe a little bit too idealistic in that he might even lack an element of pragmatism in poker, and may do the kind of Tom Dwan sort of route, actually, in that try to use it as a tool to go further and further with opportunity to the point where it hurts him in terms of pragmatism and sustainability. That I see as a potential leak with him. He certainly appears to do things that are a little bit too reckless. Coming from a guy who's quite reckless himself, I actually have a similar tendency. One thing about Elon is that I don't know if he has quite some internal integrity between his value system and his actions, but it looks like there's some leaks to that. It's hard to say 100% if that's the case. He definitely has a good poker face, so for sure people will not be able to read him, and as an element of unpredictability, at least from a typical perspective, it's hard to predict him. There is some criticism of his actions that I don't fully understand that seem to suggest he's not all about truth as what people say, or at least he didn't buy Twitter purely for the sake of free speech. I don't 100% know if he's got that or not, but the best poker players have a very strong link between their actions and integrity. That actually is a very good skill, because you need to know your overall strategy and your overall way of showing up, or how it plays out, in order to really, really be a top player. You need to really think these things through to their core. But this is an extremely hard thing to do in real life, to be fair. I think his role is extremely difficult, actually, if you really think about it. I would think Mark Zuckerberg is going to be a pretty big nit when it comes to poker. Could be totally wrong in this. Actually, a lot of poker players do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he does do that. That maybe helps. I would think that has more to do with smart risk-taking. At least he used to look like a giant nerd. I think he got coaching from somebody to say, he hired somebody to say, hey, I did not look like a giant nerd. I gotta fix this. For sure, someone was in on making him look a little bit more stylish. 100%. He hired somebody. I just sort of see him being, to be honest, like one of these fake GTO players that has almost no personality. I could be totally wrong about that. If he's not, he would totally take my money. Leonardo DiCaprio, he actually plays, to my understanding. I've heard, in fact, that he's very smart. Although people, again, don't necessarily see all that. They only see what's projected onto them. And these actors have to have a certain kind of intelligence in order to do what they do. Apparently, a lot of his success is not random. He's apparently extremely good at acting. I would think that because of this, he must have some kind of intelligence. I have played with a guy who's quite good at acting as well, Dylan Flashner. And I would think that if they have any kind of similarity, that this guy would be pretty good too, just because Dylan surprised me a couple times, whereas clearly he was adjusting in the right direction and starting to understand some concepts, especially being that it's not his first profession. And he is willing to play with people that aren't just like random shitty players. I imagine he would be good. I would think any actor has a good poker face, because you have to not only be good under pressure, but you also have to actually be a different person. Other than that, for emotional control, also a lot of these actors are weird people, as it turns out. So that probably helps. Being weird helps at being good at poker. I will say that. A lot of the poker players are quite weird. Dan Bilzerian. I know a little bit about how he plays. I've never actually played with him. I wonder, it's weird because I've seen quite a bit of humility from him, which is good. He has quite some self-awareness. A lot of the times people success or with how they got their money can go straight to their head, and being surrounded by lots of women, I would think would be counterintuitive to humility, but it doesn't seem like it's affected him too much. Kudos for that. I've heard that he's too emotional or overreactive. I saw a little bit of that in one business dealing, but I don't really know. I think that business is a bit of an indicator of how good someone's going to be at poker, just because you really need to be quite zen when doing business. And I think it's quite a bit easier to be zen at doing business in a way than it is to be zen at poker, because like it's much slower, to be honest. You have time to think about things, and in poker, you don't really have time to cool down or step away from the table. How are you going to be able to negotiate with somebody if you like can't handle like some swings in poker and negotiate in a way that doesn't piss them off? It's actually a very tough skill set. You must have some talent. I understand that he's won in the games that he's played in. I suppose that qualifies him for being a pro, although I don't really, like, maybe he's lost back. I don't really know what's going on. At least he's had some success at it. Gandhi? Well, Gandhi's not alive today. I think some of these spiritual guys might be good at poker. Matter of fact, people don't know this, but chess was created in India, and they used to gamble. A lot of the princes and stuff used to gamble. This was like, it was a big part of their culture. It's not considered a sin in India or in Hindu philosophy. And when you consider it as a sin, I think it's more a matter of if it's good for you or not. With Gandhi, people don't know this, but he was actually a shy person, but he gained the courage to overcome that shyness because he wanted to stand for justice and preach nonviolence. If he took any of that over to poker, he would have obviously not had any problems with standing pressure or running big bluffs or whatever. And obviously that had loads of self-control. Must have had some level of strategy in order to work with large groups of people and get them coordinated. I don't really even understand how he did this. A lot of positives there. Trying to think of any negatives. Doesn't give a shit about money. That's not a good thing. Last one is Michael Phelps. He is renowned for his incredible discipline, major plus in poker. I know that the sports people are a lot more disciplined than poker people because of Victor Malinowski talking about it as a former athlete. He apparently transitioned some of his discipline from being in athletics to poker to great success. I'd say he's one of the best players in the world at no limit, maybe PLO as well. Because of this, Michael must have some ability at poker. I think discipline matters more than intellectual ability. So if he applied himself, I'm sure he'd eventually win. I have a hard time imagining him being too unable to have the right emotional ability or lacking whatever intelligence needed to have some level of success. He must have some 100%. Like, again, these guys who are ultra successful must have something good going on the inside. He's a very nice guy as well, as someone who's like dealt with him in the past. There's many examples in poker of Ben Tollerino, by the way, is very, very disciplined. Actually, Jason Kuhn, also someone who's very, very disciplined, didn't necessarily have top shelf ability. Doug Polk being another one that, in spite of not having exactly top shelf ability, still quite some ability and still reached the top levels of poker. It's totally possible. You don't need insane ability in order to crush poker. You need, like, discipline matters more in poker and life, in entrepreneurship, apparently, and in everything. I'm trying to discipline my mind in order to know this. If I say it enough, discipline, then maybe I'll be as disciplined as a lot of these guys. I wish I had the discipline of this guy. It's really insane. If you read the stories of like how he trains for practice and how he eats and sleeps and all that stuff. I'm pretty much busy almost 24/7. I don't know if you know this. Some of it's resting. I don't believe in doing things 100%. I don't think that's optimal either. About Michael Phelps, he's renowned for working on his swimming 365 days a year. No matter if he's sick or if it's holidays, he's always in there, never misses a session. He's committed to what he does. According to other sources, this is a big reason why he won 23 gold medals. If he's got that level of discipline, that's got to carry over into other things as well. I know it's part of his physical prowess or his physical form as well. Apparently, he's a very, very good body type for swimming. The work ethic is really something to be admired. It'd be great to establish that level of work ethic. It would be great to acquire that level of work ethic. I believe it is possible if you continue to push yourself a little bit more every single day and be committed to the idea of working harder and harder, but slowly to the point where it's natural for you. Now, Steve Aoki. Steve Aoki is an interesting case. I know he also plays poker. I've played with him briefly. One thing I like about Steve is he's very nice to his fans. I would think that his poker face would be he's constantly happy and never really gets upset or anything. As my guess, I think I've heard otherwise, but I'm not 100% sure. I've heard that he gets upset sometimes at the poker table and feels a little bit down. I would say that he probably doesn't give a shit about money, so this would be a mark against him. For some reason, I get the impression that he's a bit of a deep thinker, which helps in terms of understanding poker. Another thing that might be a challenge for him is that he has loads of energy. I thought that having loads of energy was a universally good thing, but apparently not if you can't like focus it and it gets a little bit bit too out of control. For being a music performer, it must be amazing. And this is a big reason why he's so popular, I think, is because of all his antics, etc. His loads and loads of energy and gets everyone in a positive vibe. It would be a great asset in general if other people as well would have this, the poker table. Not so much for actually playing super well, but hint guys, if you have energy at the poker table, this would be a great, if almost no one has this and would bring a good vibe to the poker table, it makes him like quite a bit of fun to party with. So it must make him quite a bit of fun to party with. Makes him excellent party person. Not so sure how it helps with the poker table, but I believe that I have the impression that he's a bit of a deep thinker and certainly will have the poker face just because as long as he's always happy, or at least it doesn't show when he's playing, just show when he's in a hand. Oh, and another thing about Steve Aoki is he works like constantly traveling, sleeps like 4 hours a day, working 361 days per year. How the hell do you do that? So who's your pick for who would dominate the poker table of the celebrities? What are your thoughts on this video? Leave your feedback below, your thoughts below. If you pick Mike Tyson, Elon Musk, Donald Trump, or you think I'm full of shit, Michael Phelps, or Lady Gaga, I don't know. Leave your thoughts below. By the way, everyone, happy Chinese New Year and the Year of the Snake, my new favorite stuffed pin animal thing.